Hey designer, Alex here, welcome to the channel, and in today's video we're going to create this VR looking website. We're going to integrate these 3D elements which are going to animate in space, and I'm going to show you how you can utilize the time trigger in Adobe XD to achieve an effect like this. So let's get started. Alright, so to get started, I have this practice file, and you can get this same practice file to follow along this video by joining my membership. Link is going to be down in the description below if you're interested. Alongside this file, you're going to get all of my courses, all of my design products, mentorship, private access to the Facebook group, and much more. So once again, if you're interested and you want to follow along this and every future and previous YouTube tutorial, you can join my membership. Once again, link is down in the description below. Otherwise, you can simply copy what I'm doing and follow along that way. So to get started, I have this file 1920 by 1080, and I have this layout, so 12 columns, gutter width of 60, column width of 88, and margins left and right are linked to 102, just because I want to have a bit less space on each side. So to get started, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw my logo inside, and I'm going to drag and drop it in place, and I'm going to position it 40 from the top right here. So Shift 40, and you can hold your Alt or Option key to see where you are with the distances here. Next thing, I'm going to create my navigation. So let's type in features, and I'm going to switch to my layers right here, and I'm going to change this to this Poppins 24, and I'm going to put it in a group. So hit Ctrl G, and I'm going to call this group nav, just because all of my navigational items are going to be inside, and I'm going to place it right here to the center of my logo. And I'm going to include the stack, and it's going to position this horizontal stack to the right. And to do that, it's quite simple to give us the option of duplicating our items. So because we're going to have 4, I can hit Ctrl D, Ctrl D, Ctrl D to create 4 of these items, and it's going to put them in a group, one on top of each other, which is quite nice. And let's include pricing like this. Then next one is going to be investors, and finally this last one is going to be FAQ, for example. And let's see, because we have gutter width of 60, maybe we can jump in right here, and inside of our stack it's currently 10, but let's increase it to 60, just because it's going to give ourselves a lot more breathing room. And if we can go ahead and increase it to 80 or to 100, you can do whatever you want with this. And I'm going to simply select these two and put them like so. Next up, I'm going to use these feature stacks, hit Ctrl or Command C to copy it, Ctrl V to paste it in, and I'm going to position it somewhere around here, and I'm going to type in login like this. And the next thing I'm going to do is I have this button pre-prepared. I'm going to drag and drop it in place, and basically this button has this sign up text inside, and I'm basically going to bring in my login a little bit closer, and let me go ahead and reduce this to 6, just so you guys can see a little bit clearer what I am creating. Next up, we can organize these things, so I can drag this to here, drag this to here, just below our nav, and button all the way at the end, and I can select them all, hit Ctrl G to group them, and call this navigation. And let's see where we are from the top. So let's bring this to 40, because our button is a little bit taller than our logo right here. Next up, I'm going to create a text, which is going to be a big one. So let's write in connect with people who matter, like this. And I'm going to select them and put this Poppins 90, and you can use Poppins. It's a free Google font, by the way. You can use it if you want to. Next up, I'm going to create another text, which is going to go just below. So I can use my T, and I can write in, actually even better, let me quickly go ahead and copy the original text just to save ourselves a bit of time. And I'm going to click outside and select this one, just to give it this a light gray color. And let's see, for the distance I can use 40, for example, because that's what we used on top. And I can select these two, move them a bit, and I can drag and drop another instance of my button inside. and make sure that I am 80 with my button just to give ourselves a bit more breathing room. Next up, I'm going to position this to be left aligned, and I'm going to type in get started. And because I have my padding turned on, as you can see, the button is going to scale evenly. Or if you don't want it to scale evenly, what you can do is simply switch off your padding right here, but you have to do it in the default state in the main component. So if I hit right here, it's going to show us this, and I can switch off the padding, delete this button, then come back right here and simply extend my button to here if you want to have it be 3 columns wide. So it's really all up to you how you want to adjust your layout. I'm going to simply click inside to position it right here and have it like this. So you have those two options. Next up, let's group this text, but before we do, I just want to reorganize these things. Control G, call it text like this, position it below. I'm going to use my rectangle, move it from here to the bottom edge of our button, select these two, click right here to position it in the center, and then instead of deleting it, I'm going to use this rectangle and position it right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to increase the corner radius to 50. I'm going to make sure that my height is somewhere around here, I should say, and let's see, something like this, for example. And let's see, maybe we can have it a little bit smaller in height, so something like 600, for example. I think that's good. Make sure it's in the center of our text, and I'm going to call this BG shape, put it all the way to the bottom, remove our border, and simply include this nice gradient. I'm going to jump into my gradient and simply reorganize it a bit to something like this, for example. Maybe go a little bit more outside, and maybe I can even lower this down to 30, and you can simply click on your gradient stops if you want to lower the part of them down or up, but I'm happy with how this looks like. Next up, I'm going to simply introduce the 3D transform. You can use Control or Command T, or you can simply click right here. And what I'm going to do is actually really quite simple. So I'm just going to, for example, position it right here. So I can rotate it left and right, and I can hover right here to position it, for example, something like this, just so that we can have our 3D shape like this. Next up, you can exit the 3D transform mode, and you can hold your Shift, Alt, and left click just to make it a little bit smaller in height and in size. So something like this. Next up, it's time to bring in our image, and basically I just went ahead and cut off this woman from my from the background and basically created it as a PNG. I just want to reduce it in size just a little bit to something like this, and when I'm happy with it, it's time to edit all of these different elements. So before I do, I want to put it right here, and next up I want to create some circles. So the first one, I'm going to make it nice and big. I'm going to use this color, and I'm going to call it circle, something like that. And now that I created it, I can create a few more instances. So I'm going to put this one right here. Then make sure I switch off the border. Hit Control D to duplicate it one more time. Position it somewhere around here. And position it roughly around here. Then jump right here and introduce this same gradient. And I can even jump inside and reorganize it the same way like our main shape is. So for example, something like this, and I'm just doing this to include a little bit of spice inside and bring in a few more elements to make it more interesting to the viewer. And I can position this to be roughly around here, for example, something like this, make it a little bit smaller. Then Control D, position one more roughly around here. And you can be precise with these if you want to, but I'm just putting them roughly where I want them, and make sure that this one is white. Next up, I'm going to reduce the opacity, hit one of them, and then simply hit numbers on my keypad. So I'm using, for example, this one because it's the furthest away. Perhaps I can even position it to be 20. This one can be, let's say, 60 or 40. This one can be also 40, for example, and this one can be, let's see, 40 or 50. Let's go with 40. Yeah, I think 40 works well, and let's reduce it in size just a little bit. As I said, you can keep playing with these elements if you want to, and you can always jump back into 3D if you think that your shape isn't looking good enough or well enough into space. So basically it's all up to you how you want to play around with these elements. Next up, let's create that chat bubble, but before we do, I want to group all of my circles and call them circles. Something is bugging me about XD. It doesn't allow me to rename before I save, so I'm going to hit Control S, and sometimes you're going to get into issues like these, so it should work now. Let's see. And to avoid issues like these, you can always save it out as a cloud file, but I like to save my files to the desktop just because I am used to it hitting Control S all of the time to make these changes. Hey designers, sorry to interrupt myself, but I just wanted to quickly mention that you can get this practice file alongside every course and product I have ever made in my membership. You can get this practice file if you want to follow along this and every future video I make. A link is going to be down in the description below, so you can check it out if you're interested. Now let's get back to the video. So as I said, let's create those shapes. So if you remember from the preview, what I had is the chat bubble. So I'm going to create it like this. Make sure it's 50, make sure I remove the border, and I can jump inside and call this chat BG, for example. And I can also hit T on my keyboard and type in David, for example. Next up, I can change this text to this color, for example, and this size. Make sure both of them are centered like this, and I can also go right here and create one rectangle. Make sure I flip it around like this. Sorry, one triangle, not rectangle. Position it roughly around here, and you can squish it, do whatever you want with it. And I can position it behind and call this triangle, for example. And what you can do is you can remove the border, and you can simply click right here to combine them into one shape, and then you can call it chat bubble, for example, like so, and then bring these two and call it chat 1. And you can zoom outside, hit Control D, and position the next one roughly around here, for example. But before we do, let's jump back to here and let's create a shadow. So I can create something like big 5, 5, and 10, for example. And let's lower down the opacity of the shadow itself to 8, perhaps. I think that works well. And maybe I can even lower it down more to something like 5. Yeah, I think that's better. Control D to duplicate this one, and I can position this one a bit outside, and then I can jump back in and bring this back to 10, for example, just so I want it to be right here. And I can type in Maria, for example, in this one, like so. And what I can do is call this chat 2 and position it just below my chat 1, and I can change the colors. So just to bring a little bit of separation, I'm going to use this color here, and for the David I'm going to use the blue, so opposite colors of the spectrum. And basically the last thing we need to create before we move on to animation are those chat bubbles with people inside. So once again, the same thing, I'm going to create a rectangle roughly around this size, 50 right here, remove the border, and what I can do is simply jump into here, right click, copy, click right here, paste appearance, and it's going to paste that shadow in. So I can type in something like let's see, person BG or person chat BG or whatever you want to call this, and I can create a nice big circle. And just so I and you guys can see it, I'm going to use this color, and I can position it in the center of this one, and I can simply position it right here and make sure I hold my shift key to make it a little bit smaller, just so that it fits nicely here. And right here we can increase this to 10, just so it's a bit more obvious, especially to this edge. And you can also bump it right here to 10, for example, just so it pushes it down even more if that's something that you want to. This is going to be called avatar, like so. And I'm going to use Control D on this one, make sure I remove the shadow and make sure that I create it to be this color, and I'm going to simply squish it in like this, and make sure I extend it a bit out, Control D, and make sure I'm 10 apart, make sure I'm in the center, and perhaps 10 on this side, and then I can play around with this side if I want to. And this is basically going to be an imitation of a text. If you want to, you can obviously include the real text, but I'm not going to bother with this one. Basically what we created right here is I can give this a text, for example, like that, and I can also hit Control V to paste it in right here, and I can group them, call them person, like so, and just make sure that I don't have any shadow on my avatar, or you can if that's the effect you're going for. I'm going to push this right around here and also extend this BG a bit outside, and I can position them right here. Next up, it's time to add our images, and basically you can use different plugins if you want to, but I already have some images pre-prepared from my years of design work. Basically, I'm just going to drag and drop them inside, but as I said, you have some great plugins to choose from. And if I go outside back to my plugins list, what you can use is this one called UI Faces. It's free and you can install it if you want to. So basically that's it for our design. This is how it looks like once it's finished. And what I'm going to do is basically group all of these elements and call them elements, like this, and basically move them and the circles just behind and below all of these elements. Let's do that one more time. So roughly around here, just so the text is on top. Next up is time to animate our design. What I'm going to do is first of all hide these columns so they are not distracting. Hit Control D to make a duplicate of our design. And what you can do is basically just play around with every single element inside. You can increase this in size if you want to. You can reduce this, and you can even jump in right here and change this gradient color back to a darker one, something like this. Then you can position this to be roughly around here, for example. This can even be smaller, and this white circle can, for example, be right here, and you can also reduce its opacity. You can move Maria if you want to roughly around here, David roughly around here, and then you can click right here to bring them into 3D, and you can simply switch them around like this. And for Maria, we can do something different, for example, down like this, and then to the left. So once again, it's really all up to you what you want to do with these, and I'm going to push these two, for example, in the same direction to roughly around here, and I can even push this in just above her arm, for example. And this one I can even push down if I want to. And finally, for this shape, what I'm going to do is perhaps rotate it even more. Let's see, like this and like this. So we are very far outside, and I can position this right here, and we can even lower this down in opacity more to, for example, 20%. So once again, it's really all up to you what you want to do and how you want to play around with these elements. So what I'm going to do is finally go to my prototype, drag this handle right here. So I'm going to use tap just to initiate this, but you can also use time, and I'm going to actually show you how the time looks like, and I'm going to introduce a bit of delay of 2 seconds, for example. Transition is going to be auto animate, ease in out right here, and duration of 5 seconds, which is the longest duration that we have. And I'm going to bring this in right here. So delay, once it finishes this side of animation, is going to come to here, and then it's going to wait for 2 seconds because that's the delay right here, or you can introduce it without any delay. It's really all up to you. Then it's going to do this easing, ease in out. It's going to last 5 seconds between these two screens. So let's hit preview and see what we've got so far. So this is how it's going to look like. As you can see, all of these elements are shifting, they are changing. playing around in 3D, and basically you can explore all of these different options and how you want to adjust them. And one quick thing that I want to mention, if you include a hover effect for these buttons, for example, they are not going to work because at the moment of recording of this tutorial, Adobe XD does not have the function to support hover effect inside of the time transitions. That's something which I heard is coming later this year, hopefully. So hopefully inside of this hover effect, we are going to be able, instead of this time effect, we are going to be able to include different hover effects for our buttons, for our text, for our images, and many other elements. Thank you for watching this video. I really hope you found some value in it. If you did, make sure to click that like button and make sure to subscribe to the channel. I upload new videos every single week here on the channel about Adobe XD, about design, passive income techniques, and more. So if you're interested, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.